the suppression of the use of marijuana and of the forces lurking behind it are the most important jobs this department is now engaged in. In 1930, the records on marijuana in the Washington office of the Narcotics Division scarcely filled a small folder like this. Today, they fill cabinets.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, Coloradians and everyone that's smart enough to listen from the outside.
One of the most amazing plants we've ever discovered.
The pot party, the trippers, the grasshoppers, the hip ones, all gathered in secrecy and flying high as a kite.
Wheaties! I got weed pots!
Good for radio.
You are great for radio. TV will cross that bridge in 2022.
Not a chance.
But yeah, so we'll do this whenever you're ready to rock and roll. We can get this podcast.
I'm ready whenever you guys are.
All right, well, let's do the Wayne's World countdown. And 5, 4. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another week of Stone d'Appetit. With your host, as always, it's me, Kip. And to my left, I got CB. How are you, CB?
Dude, doing great. We're shooting not at a typical location. We're at an art studio.
Yeah. So most of the folks know that we usually are recording from a restaurant or a bar, maybe a musician's backyard or something of that nature. But today, I think we have our first graffiti or street artist to join us on the pod, and we have the artist famously known as Jolt joining us, and we are coming to you from his studio today.
Live on location.
Live on location. And this is probably one of our better episodes because the fumes are going to get us higher and we're going to be better as the episode goes on.
Yeah. Love huff and paint.
Yeah. Well, before we get to the guest, we want to do two things. We want to give a shout out to our sponsors, Live Nation Colorado. Without them, none of this would ever have been possible. So in 2020, without concerts, they need our help. If you can go over to livenation.com, scroll down like 2 fingers worth, and you'll see a little donation tab called Save the Crew. What it will do is you can donate or volunteer, make other folks aware of the situation where these employees that work for these bands and for these venues are out of work right now, and so they need our help more than ever. So go over to livenation.com, scroll down a little bit, and see if you can help the cause. All right, without further ado, let's introduce our guest. I mentioned artist name, I guess famously known as Jolt. Is it just a one-word Jolt, kind of like Madonna, Cher, Prince, Jolt?
Yep, that's it.
Well, dude, we appreciate you joining us today. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
All right, hold on. Before we go further, though, was Jolt like a nickname, or
Yeah.
How'd Jolt come about?
So I've been going by that name since 1996. And it was a name given to me because I used to break dance in the park with a bunch of my friends at like 12 years old. And yeah, that's just become my de bloom since then.
Oh,
I like it.
Yeah, it's a lot better than having like a nickname, like, oh, how'd you come up with it? And they're like, oh, I gave it to myself. Yeah. So at least you have
Or
like
kids are making fun of me. I don't know.
Yeah. And, 96, that's some real holding power, I think is the term. We're sitting on 23, 24 years, so well done on that.
Yeah. Yeah, man.
And, you've made a name for yourself, and no offense, I don't know about your breakdancing skills, but we're here today to talk to you because you're well-known graffiti street artist here in Denver and around the country, so we wanted to kind of pick your brain and get to know you a little bit better.
Yeah.
How the hell did you become a graffiti artist? Where do we start? Like, where does the background start? Were you breakdancing here in Denver?
Here, where we literally are, like this neighborhood. The culture of hip-hop was a part of the community. So I grew up with it in the neighborhood. There was walls that were painted. Denver wasn't as developed, so there's more abandoned buildings, like leftover things from, like the 30s and 40s. And,
when it was like cow shipping towns. Like just
there wasn't
west.
anything here. The bridges were still old school viaducts. They looked like the Brooklyn Bridge. So it was a different picture, but in the community, there was places to paint and hip hop culture, and that from breakdancing to DJing to MCing to graffiti art was very prevalent. And this neighborhood specifically had a rich culture for that. So I was everybody did graffiti.
Okay.
Everybody did.
When you said there were like walls to paint, are you talking about like were they like set up or just going out on random walls?
It was just abandoned buildings.
Both? Like
Both.
sometimes like
So
neighbors or shit?
There was legal walls in the neighborhood that were painted, always getting repainted. And then there was also, the train yards and all the warehouses.
Okay. Real quick though, on that note, like when let's say like you're growing up in the neighborhood, somebody paints a wall. What's the code on like how long does that art stay up before you can paint over it?
It's only the artist painting over themselves.
Oh, so until the artist comes and paints over it, nobody can paint over it.
No, yeah. So that's an artist's walls. It belongs to maybe a crew.
Okay.
And if you're a part of that crew, you can paint it. But nobody can just show up and paint. And that goes for the illegal walls too. So
Okay.
Like an unwritten code.
unwritten code of
So like the guy that's tagging the side of our building in Cap Hill, is he in a group or is that like one guy and it's just the same guy over and over? Because I always feel like it's somebody coming over the top of another person. So is it always just the same like group or same guy doing it every time?
So what I'm talking about is like staying out there all day, painting something very colorful and artistic. Whoever's tagging your building is probably just a bunch of people that are passing by.
Yeah,
It's probably
Yeah.
It's probably people that live in your building. It's probably somebody very unassuming.
I figured it was like a 13-year-old on a skateboard on his way to the park.
And which it very well could be. And I
Y'all
always
talking
get
big
excited
shit.
when I see those graffiti writers because it tells me that there's a new generation. But it very well could be like some 40-year-old, dude that has a pretty good job. And I'm not joking. Like
Just those guys that
graffiti is a culture, man, and it's one that's been around for a long time, and people do grow up, but not necessarily have to grow out of doing it. Or can I cuss?
you
Yeah.
can say whatever the fuck you want.
Yeah.
You don't have to start giving a fuck in a different manner, or give less a fuck about tagging on some shit. And there's a language that's going on, and when you're a part of it, people say graffiti is addictive. And
It's like tattoos.
I have friends that work in all levels of what you would consider successful, and they've been doing graffiti just as long as me, if not longer, and you would not know. So it's not always just some 13-year-old kid, but it's also your 13-year-old son out there doing this.
God, I hope I don't have a 13-year-old.
Oh man, there's I know people that graffiti is in their family.
Really? It was like a hobby that they passed down, or like a trade?
It's a culture that is passed down, that people are born into.
I think you can tell from most of my drawings, my dancing, and also my singing that I have no rhythm or artistic ability. So I stand and talk.
It's okay. You play the cards you're dealt. So real quick though, like how were you? So I understand like the bridge between hip hop and like that all that culture, but like how did you used to draw, or how did you morph into like graffiti?
I've always been an artist. So my grandmother was an art teacher. My father was an artist and musician. So I was an artist, like just an artist my whole life.
Okay.
I drew, I painted, airbrush. I was exposed to like automotive arts, in terms of like custom paint jobs and things like that, and also like taxidermy. My father did that, so and there's airbrush that comes into that. So that's how I learned how to airbrush.
Oh, really?
For faces and things like that, like a
bass.
touch-up?
Yeah.
And they do like say a rainbow trout or something, like the fish. There's
okay.
airbrush.
Really?
Yeah. So I was exposed to. So art was always in my house.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's a little disappointing. I thought those were all colorful fish. Well, okay, so how did you realize that, like you mentioned, it's nice to see that there's another generation coming in, but it feels like, I may be coming from a different, obviously, culture or society, but it seems like it's caught on huge to where, like, it's become organized things and it's become on a multitude of buildings that it wasn't 10 years ago.
Yeah.
How did it come to that fruition, and when did you realize that you're like, I can make a living doing this in addition to being, a DJ or an MC and things like that? How did you realize, this is a fruitful venture? How did the world come to that?
These are two different questions.
That's a loaded question.
But my personal growth in it that led to this point would be very early. So at like 19, 20 years old, I was working with an agent in New York already, starting my career. And that happened because the years leading up to that, I was talking to you about me traveling and stuff.
Right.
I was doing that stuff like very early when I was supposed to be in high school. So I was already like traveling to other cities and doing a lot of graffiti. It just so happened a lot of graffiti writers were starting to work with this agent because we were doing commercial advertisement and we would do the same murals everywhere. So we would do a mural for whoever, some big name brand, and that would be replicated in a bunch of different cities. They contacted me because they wanted to get into a market of Denver, and through having a name in the graffiti world, they got a hold of me. You guys look stoned.
I'm also fascinated.
Yeah.
I come from a place
Looking
where
at you
this
so
was not a
stoned.
market. Like there was no market for
No, there
graffiti
was-
artists
okay.
in Mississippi. So this is all
But-
new to me. I'm fascinated.
You know, but understand that there wasn't in Denver either.
And I got
Nonetheless, people living off of their art. And this is me at 19 being able to do this because I've been traveling and doing real graffiti all over, and my name was connected in a conversation. And so by doing that first job, that turned into a relationship that lasted, man, probably maybe 8-9 years with that specific person. And when you can make a living off of it, you can buy your time to develop more of a, you know. So that's what bought my time to you know, pursue it and be the artist that I am now.
That was a great question, or great answer to my first part of that question. So thank you for taking the time. to do
Two-parter?
that. Yeah, it was a two-parter, and it was kind of a mouthful and a loaded one, like you mentioned. And the second part was like I just kind of prefaced that I have no frame of reference, but like when did it become such a regular thing to see like murals across the whole city? And like is Denver late to this party? Has it been going on across the country? Because I know it
Yeah.
hasn't been going on in Jackson, Mississippi, or Starkville, Mississippi, where I went to school and grew up before here. So I'm just curious where this momentum or wave came from, because it feels like most buildings now have murals on the side of them.
Because it's interest for developers when gentrifying a community to go in and have the street art be on the walls to create a different look. Street art and graffiti are two different things as well. The communities in Denver that are full of street art were once more so graffiti. Graffiti writers were painting down there letters, names, crews. So with the interest of developers, Denver did catch on late to the party because, Brooklyn, Bushwick, that whole, that was early. Or Art Basel in Miami. That neighborhood's called Overtown, but they call it Wynwood. It's the same. It's used as a tool for development. Artists in general, are just coming in, painting the walls and giving it. But it does a lot. It does bring a lot to. I mean, art on walls and color on walls, it just does something, And then when you have it in abundance, where there's festivals and things going on around it, there's more interest to it. But that catapulted, quote unquote, street art to where it is now, was development.
I appreciate you answering that question for me, because you dumbed it down for me, because I was a little bit new to it, and you're right. It kind of like it takes a wall and it brightens it up. It changes what a building looks like all in its entirety just from painting on one side of it. It's pretty interesting.
Let me
So
add this: that there is part of every public development in Denver, 1% per the taxpayers voting on it goes towards public art in that place as well. So our city is set up, and this is an important thing too. When you travel, you're going to look at a city's museums. You're going to look at their public art. You're going to look, these are the things that are going to define a city to you. So it's in a city's interest, in that same sense, to put forth good art. And so that's why when the airport is built or when different buildings are built, there comes an opportunity for somebody to go for the gig and get 1% of what's available.
Okay. Yeah, sounds good. But would you say, like, real quick though, like when you were talking about street art and graffiti, so would you say you're also a street artist, or you're just graffiti?
I would say that the definition has changed, but myself, I'm a street artist because my art is born of the streets. It was, essentially born in the streets. I'm an artist that comes of that. But I think the definition is a bit different nowadays. People that call themselves street artists, their art wasn't necessarily born into the street culture.
They didn't learn
some of
doing
these
walls.
a lot of these are art school students and people from the suburbs, not people from the inner city that grew up, painting on the bridges and things like that. So the definition